Welcome back, listeners. So, Josh, before we move on to maybe what's going on the soybean side of things, I would just like to say that you called your trial simple, but we decided it should be a simple, super cool trial because it is actually very intriguing, though, a simple concept. So, you weren't giving it enough credit.
I agree. I agree. It is super cool. And no, it's an exciting trial for sure.
But yeah, moving on for segment two, we're going to just talk about kind of what we're seeing on the soybean side of things. Um, Yet this week, there's some folks that had some earlier maturity beans, maybe a point 0.9 and then a group of some of those 1.1s that I think folks they're going to start working on harvest. Josh, you maybe have a few more of those earlier beans in your corner of the world. What's your take on some of
Yeah,
those coming out?
I think today's the day. I think today this afternoon, I think we'll see a few combines hit the countryside here in Fillmore County in the southeast corner. And you just kind of needed yesterday to kind of, get them dried down here a little bit. And it'll be exciting to see if they're dry enough to go and if we can get some early reads on yield. But yeah, sometimes it's just a really good gauge to see maybe what to expect. And yeah, I expect to see some go tomorrow. And hopefully next week we can actually talk about kind of what we're seeing for yields. And I'm just excited to see harvest get along. But yeah, I think today's the day. So stay tuned. If you're driving around this afternoon, I think you'll see some combines out around Fillmore County.
Good. That sounds good. Because like you said, it's kind of the time of the year where we're waiting, waiting, waiting. We get a little bit antsy. So it's nice to
Mhm.
see harvest start rolling in some sort of a capacity. But another interesting thing on the soybean side of things, which kind of sticks true to the year of 2020, we had a lot of phone calls earlier this week on full fields or just bean fields that had turned a deeper purple, kind of bronzy color. And at first, I think we initially thought this could potentially be something contributed to Cercospora leaf blight. You tend to see similar coloration with that disease coming into play. But because we saw this, all of a sudden at one point in time, kind of overnight and across a wide geography, it feels like it's maybe a little bit more of an environmental response. And we don't feel like it's something that's going to hurt yield. But any just thoughts on potentially what we're thinking that the cause could be?
Yep. Yeah. It was kind of pandemonium on Monday, Tuesday there for people calling about what was going on. And it was something you could really see just driving around southeast Minnesota. And I think, I don't want to make this overly complicated, but it was likely just an environmental trigger. If you kind of look at where we'd been at, we'd been through a dry spell, really warm. Then we kind of went into what was it, a 5 or 6 day prolonged damp and cool period. We got some moisture, but we also got really cool. And I think what happened was, we got some moisture, we got cool. And I just think we accumulated some sugars in the upper part of the plant that really triggered like this purpling look. And as we got warmer, it kind of faded away. But, just to calm everybody, number one, I don't think it's going to have any impact on yield. A few things. I had a lot of people fear that the soybeans are going to turn purple inside the pods. And just trust me on this one. The beans aren't going to turn purple and there won't be a grain quality issue. And I think for the most part, it was just an environmental thing. I've seen this in some rare case in the past, right? I've seen beans do this. Sometimes you may see it more in the pods than the leaves, where this one was kind of a combination of both, which made it unique. But just an environmental trigger, some moisture and some translocation and accumulation in the upper part of the plant. And from what I could tell too, it kind of faded as the week went on. Allie, I'm not sure what you saw.
Yeah, it sounded like, the color was much more of that deeper color Sunday into early Monday. And then, like you said, as we warmed up, we seemed to see some of that kind of work itself through with some of those warmer temps, just probably better able to metabolize whatever was the sugars or whatever it might be that was kind of causing that color. But another thing on the soybean side of things that I think is worth mentioning, just to kind of make sure we think about is next year we're managing our beans in season. Really quiet on the aphid front this year, but as we got later, kind of at that time that we thought we were aphid free, kind of in the clear zone, we did have populations ramp up quite aggressively in some cases. And you were saying you've even seen some fields where, you can still see the aftermath or aphids there doing damage in some of these fields.
Yeah. Last week I was walking some beans and ran into, these are still pretty green beans, but ran into some pockets that really fired up with soybean aphids. They were treated with insecticide and fungicide timing, but that was back in July. You fast forward a month and they really flared up in the last part of August, and in some cases might have a yield impact. The plants and the stems are pretty black, where you could tell there was a lot out there. In some cases they're still there. And I was walking some beans yesterday, even with leaves that are probably halfway 50% drop rate, and there's still aphids on those leaves, which is not something we normally see. But I do think I agree, Allie. I think some got overlooked. And I think as we get the combines rolling, we're going to find a few pockets here and there where the beans are kind of dark, maybe a little off on yield. And it's going to be as a result of some really high aphid populations that flared up in kind of the last probably 8 to 10 days of August is when they flared up, and they kind of hung around basically until senescence. I've seen that a couple times in my 14, 15 years in the field. It's rare. But yeah, it's just a pest that sometimes when we get past August 20th, you're just going to say, hey, we're far enough along, no big deal. And this might have been one of those rare years that we maybe still could have justified some treatments in some situations.
You've been listening to Today in Agronomy on KFIL AM 1060. If you've missed part of the show or want to hear more, check out the show page at kfilradio.com or with the 103.1 KFIL app. Stay connected with Allie and Josh on Twitter. It's at AllieGWise, W-I-S-E, and at Josh Schaffner to submit your questions for the show. Tune in next Wednesday for the next Today in Agronomy on KFIL AM 1060.